Hi there, it is time for Meals with Melissa. I've missed you the last couple of weeks. It's been really busy on my end. We've had back-to-back shows pretty much all over the Pacific Northwest. So it's been a little busy and I apologize that I couldn't bring you the weekly Meals with Melissa, but today is a really great one. We are doing a low-carb pumpkin bread. Now, for those of you that don't like pumpkin, just move on. I do other stuff, I swear. But I love pumpkin spice. I love everything about it. Don't love pumpkin pie, weird fact. But you know what? So I like pumpkin and everything else. So we're gonna make something fun today. Now, I've been doing a lot of research on how insulin can actually cause you, insulin is the primary cause of weight gain. So of course, the more carbs that you eat, why would your body utilize body fat for fuel? So just keep that in mind. That's why I choose a lot of low carb. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all just because it is low carb. You know, we're using other things instead of regular flour, all-purpose flour. We're actually using almond flour and coconut flour, which of course has a little bit more in the way of fats, a little bit healthier versions of things for you, but that doesn't mean it's eat all you want, right? So, you know, keep that in mind that you still have to plug it into your MyFitnessPal, figure out how it fits your macros. You can have a piece here and there and still, you know, maintain a great balance in life. So that's what we're doing today. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it's not gonna taste like traditional pumpkin bread or zucchini bread because we're not using sugar. We're actually using Swerve, which is erythritol. I will tell you on erythritol that it gives me a little bit of digestive distress if I eat too much of it. So, you know, I really try to keep my portions small, you know, because I do like something. I have a total sweet tooth, so I like something here or there, but I also know that if I eat too much of it, it's going to tell me it's not happy about that. So keep that in mind. All right, so first thing you need to do is to, of course, turn on your oven. You want to pre-bake it or preheat it so you can bake to 350. I'm using a slightly smaller pan today because, as you know, I like to do half batches so I can make a batch pre-show here, and then I can show you what it actually looks like and then make the batch while we're doing it. So it calls for a 9x5 pan. This one's a slightly smaller. I want to say it's like a 4x, I don't know, maybe a 4x8. Not quite as big, so it's going to make a slightly smaller loaf. But you do want to spray it with some pan spray, and I'm also going to use my favorite tool in the world, parchment paper, just to make sure that it comes out super easy and it doesn't stick. Okay, so putting that in my little pan here, and I've just baked a batch, so again, I can show you exactly what it looks like. Now, this isn't our first round. I actually tried this a few weeks ago just because I just wanted some. You know, I find some of these ideas on Pinterest and decide to try them out just to make sure that they're worth it, and my whole family loves it. So just like those biscuits that we did, those sausage breakfast biscuits that we did a few weeks ago, man, those are the bomb. We have made them multiple times since then. Matter of fact, I just made some last night so that my son could have some. Okay, so this is ready to go. I'm gonna put this aside, okay? And now I'm gonna mix the dry ingredients just really quick. I'm gonna sift it. I recommend that you sift it just because, you know, coconut and almond flour can get a little clumpy and you do want it to mix fairly well. So on the almond flour, use something fairly fine. I know some people like to make their own. That's not gonna be something I do. I'll just buy it prepared because I don't have a lot of time for that. So I'm gonna use, now the recipe, again, I'm making a half batch, but I'm gonna tell you the full batch and then I will put the recipe down below. So in regular batch, you're gonna use 1.5 cups of almond flour, okay? I'm going to use 1/2 cup of coconut flour. And again, you'll be able to, honestly, I have to smell them to tell the difference. They are slightly different in color, but you can totally tell when you smell it. The coconut flour does smell like coconut. It is a little more absorbative too, so we're using a little less of that than the almond flour. Okay, now I'm gonna use a myriad of spices and also some baking powder in order to get it to rise. We're gonna do 4 teaspoons of baking powder. And again, like I said, I'm making a half batch and my oven's ready, it just told me so. So 4 teaspoons of baking powder. So again, I'm gonna have half it, so I'm gonna do 2. Okay, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. So I'm gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon. Okay, it's kind of the spices that, no, I bet you could probably do pumpkin pie spice, it would work great. But we just happen to have all the ingredients that I possibly need to do this individually. All right, so a 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Okay, and I'm throwing this all in my little sifter so I can just sift it all together. It mixes it fairly well, fairly quickly, and then I don't have to worry about it. A 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. And again, you know, I love to bake, so I tend to have all this stuff on hand, which I know is kind of funny. Okay, so, and I don't have a 1/8 measuring, so I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it a little bit. And then also 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, of ground cloves. So again, I'm not gonna use a ton, but I do want to get a little splash of that for, oh, I love the smell of it. Okay, that's probably more than enough right there. And then also a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. All right, getting there, getting there. Super, super simple. All right, so I'm gonna sift that together. Like I said, that mixes it up. All right. I grew up baking with my mother and my grandmother, and so, you know, they taught me to use a sifter. As a matter of fact, they had one that was really, really close to this. I've seen some other options, but it's fast. My kids like to use it, and it does a good job at getting it all the way through. Okay, and actually I threw the erythritol in there instead of, now that I'm thinking about it, instead of the almond flour. So let me measure that out really quick. It's okay, it actually gets mixed with the butter, but it'll be fine. Okay, so I need to make sure that I get the almond flour in there. So 1. See, I make mistakes too. It happens all the time. We just go with it. All right. So almond flour, got that. All right, so now I'm gonna mix the wet ingredients. You actually want to, again, allow your ingredients to be room temperature. So your butter and your eggs should be room temperature, especially your butter, because otherwise it won't mix correctly, and then you'll have clumps in your bread, and you really don't want that. So I've let this sit out plenty long, so it should mix fairly well. And like I said, I'm supposed to throw the erythritol in there, and I accidentally already put that in the batter, but that's all right. So I'm gonna, now, fair warning, I know my KitchenAid is really, my mixer is really loud for some strange reason. I used to have a smaller one that worked great, so just bear with me for a second. It's gonna be kind of loud. All right. All right, I'm gonna throw the eggs in there really quick. So if you're, it actually calls for 4 large eggs, and again, I'm doing a half batch, so I'm gonna do 2. And then mix in between. I'm gonna throw those in there just real quick. This is right up my alley. I love to bake, and you know, if I can make a slightly healthier version of something, well then I kind of, you know, get all the benefits of it. Okay, so I'm gonna mix that up really well. Okay. Now I'm also going to throw in 3/4 cup of canned pureed pumpkin. Now you can actually make your own if you like to, but it tends to be a lot wetter, a lot more moisture in it, so actually have to kind of squeeze it out and dry it a little bit. But you know what, for this particular recipe, I don't mind doing the canned pumpkin. So I'm gonna throw, like I said, it's 3/4 cup, and again, I am halving it, so it's not quite that much. Okay. And then I'm also going to throw in a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Weird fact about vanilla extract. For some odd reason, I did not realize that in the last couple of years, the cost of vanilla has basically skyrocketed. So when the last time I went to buy my vanilla, I almost choked on myself looking at the price. But honestly, the funny part is, that's how long it's been since I've had to buy one, because it lasts forever at my house. All right, so I'm gonna throw this in here and mix this up, and then I'm gonna start adding the dry ingredients very slowly, just so that it mixes pretty well. Now you can actually do a mix in as well if you like nuts. Again, this is gonna be a little higher in fat. So notice we're using butter, we're using nut flours. So you don't necessarily, you know, depending on what your macros are for the day, I choose to eat a little higher in fat, a little low in carb at this point. Just, again, has to do with insulin and what I'm trying to do at the moment. But I do like to throw in my favorite all-time find, which is sugar-free Lily's dark chocolate chips. Now, they are not made with Splenda, because I'm not a fan at this point. They're actually made with stevia. And of course, like all things, use them sparingly and in balance. But I'm gonna throw some of those in at the end as well before I throw it in my pan. Okay, so I'm gonna mix this up a little bit. I'm gonna start adding the dry ingredients as well. And you might need to scrape down the sides a little bit, just because, again, that butter needs to get mixed in really well. Matter of fact, I'm gonna do that first before I start putting the dry ingredients in. Get that all nice and mixed. And of course, if I would have thrown the erythritol in with it, it probably would have mixed just a little bit better, but I'm not really too worried about it. This is one of those, the texture is gonna be a little different than your average breads, just because again, you're using a different type of flours. All right, so I'm gonna slowly start to mix in the dry ingredients. I usually make a huge mess when I do this, so we'll see how this rolls. All right, so far so good. Now it's gonna be a little thicker than a regular bread batter, so just keep that in mind. That's normal. Got some flyaways going on there. I can actually taste the erythritol as it powders out. All right. Okay, so that's gonna mix a little bit. There we go. All right, I'm gonna throw some of those chocolate chips in there. Half a cup is usually pretty good. And I'm making a huge mess because I'm good at that. All right. I'll take a second to push it down on the sides. I'm gonna mix it just for 2 more seconds, and I'm gonna throw it in the loaf pan. You just wanna make sure that it gets all incorporated really, really well, right? Because you don't wanna have separated ingredients because then it just doesn't cook right and it turns out kind of funky. All right. So, one more time. Perfect. All right, good to go. So, I'm gonna take my pan, scrape all this out. You know, my family makes a pumpkin bread recipe that's just a regular pumpkin bread recipe. It's one of those recipes that, you know, we make for Thanksgiving, we make to give away, because if we make too much of it, we eat it all. And it's regular, you know, it has sugar. It actually has regular pumpkin, grated pumpkin, kind of like zucchini, but those are one of those things that we use for a treat, not something that really fits with our regular macros. So we're saving that for Thanksgiving, because at my house, we all eat really clean, and then on Thanksgiving, we eat what we want to eat, because we enjoy that. So that's how we're gonna roll. All right, so I'm gonna put this in my pan, picking up some stray chocolate chips here. All right, I'm gonna scoop that into my pan and just kind of press it down so that it's about even. Like I said, it's a little thicker than normal dough. It's almost kind of looks like a cookie dough, or, you know, something to that effect with its consistency, but it works just fine. All right, push it in. I didn't say I was graceful. All right, flatten that out, push it in. I have one more tip for you on this, and I'll show you what the real thing looks like here in just a sec. All right, so like I said, a little bit thicker. I'm gonna kind of push it around to make sure that the loaf gets baked equally. Now, if your bread tends to bake a little too fast and browns a little too fast on the top, you can always throw some tin foil over it, just to keep the tops from browning too far. I find that I like the crunchy little part, so I don't really care. All right. Okay, so I've just pressed it all flat. My fingers just a little bit. It'll spread out a little bit on its own. So that's what that looks like. I'm gonna throw this in the oven, and then let me show you what it actually looks like when it's done. All right, set my timer. Now it's gonna take, because I'm making a smaller loaf, I'm gonna set it for about 40 minutes and check it at about that point. You'll be able to tell because when you poke it, it'll be dry. It's really super simple. It's not crazy like a brownie where you're not quite sure. Works great. So what it's gonna look like here when you're finished, and again, mine's a little smaller loaf. Last time I made it a bit, definitely a bigger bread tin, and of course it was thicker, but because I wanted to half batch it to show it to you, it's gonna be a little thinner. You do want to let it sit for a few minutes after you take it out of the oven, just to make sure that the sides, it's not sticking to the sides, but of course I used parchment paper, so it was super simple to pull it out. Now, one of my favorite things to do on this one, again, because the sugar substitute's a little different, I actually grabbed a little bit of Swerve Confectioner's sugar, which again is erythritol. They do make a granulated, which is in the recipe itself, but I'm actually going to dust it with just a little bit of the confectioner sugar, so basically it's like powdered sugar, because it just gives it a little bit of a sweet, because again, stevia is a little more bitter than some of the other sugar substitutes, so it's kind of an acquired taste. In my household, we're used to it at this point. We're really trying to back away from Splenda. Unfortunately, Splenda contains maltodextrin, which is basically basically a sugar. So it is gonna raise your blood sugar. So if you are a diabetic and you're struggling with that, that might be your issue. But I'm just gonna put a little bit in my hand of the Swerve Confectioners, and I'm just gonna dust, you could do it any way you want to, but I'm just gonna dust a little bit over the top. We just found that it tastes really good. It gives it a little bit of a sweet, you know, as you first bite into it. And that's what it's gonna look like. I know you can't really see it here, but I got my little sugar-free chocolate chips in there. It tastes great. You know, it gives you something, it's the season. I love pumpkin, I love the flavors, I love the taste, love Thanksgiving. So, you know, I wanna incorporate pumpkin as much as possible, and this was a great recipe to do it for. So please let me know if you guys try this out. Let me know how it turns out. I will post a recipe here in a little bit down below. And if you have questions, please ask, or you can direct message me with any questions that you have as well. Or if you have a great recipe that you would love to share, you know, I get mine mostly from Pinterest, because of course I love Pinterest, but I look everywhere. So if you've got something great, we would love to share it. So have an incredible weekend, you guys, and until next week, that's Meals with Melissa. Have a good day.